I'm sitting down at the lower corner of the Hay Estate, which is right around where the Roosevelt maple used to be planted. This maple was a gift from Teddy Roosevelt, who worked very closely with John Hay. I want to use this opportunity to talk about privilege in environmental spaces. So I've popped back down to the shores of Lake Sunapee to tell you a story about the Sunapee State Park. So right now we're looking at Mount Sunapee and you can actually see the ski trails. If you bring your eye a little bit below the ski trails, you'll see there's a set of land that actually looks quite different from the forest up on the top of the mountain. That's actually because that land was logged in the early 1900s. I want to tell you a little story about it, so I thought I would do it here. Logging companies were clear-cutting hardwood forests on Mount Sunapee, but the locals objected because it actually made the mountain look really unattractive. In 1909, someone named Herbert Welsh, who was a wealthy elite person from Pennsylvania, was very important in getting support to create the Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests and to fundraise for it. Welsh raised over $8,000 needed at the time to purchase the land that you see in front of me. In today's money, that's $2.3 million. Something that's really interesting to note is that the land that he bought was actually the land that had already been logged down here where the farm used to be. That means that this action was not done to preserve the aesthetic for people on the lake in his time. Instead, it was made to preserve the aesthetic of the lake for future generations. So over several years, him and his group buy the majority of the mountain, and they actually raise enough funds to pay for staff and infrastructure to facilitate hiking. This includes an overnight lodge, boat docks, and trails from the train station that would have been located down at the other end of the lake. This demonstrates that tourism, which was needed to preserve wilderness, was actually facilitating forest regeneration in this era. So before, when it had been used for its utilitarian purposes, it was logged and it was used as farmland, so it was cleared. Now we see that the forest has recovered in part because of the stewardship provided by people who were able to, due to their economic means, purchase the land and create the facilities that allowed this environmental public good to be active in the region. So the ski area opens in 1948, and this again shows how an area of environmental wealth had greater access to environmental goods. So people who were able to be better advocates due to their economic means were able to provide better environmental goods and better protections for themselves. We're often really lucky to be in these spaces because of generations of people before who sought to protect natural spaces in the 1900s. However, it's really important that we recognize their positionality and how the conservation movement had its base in elitist and racist societies. So that means that a lot of these spaces are specifically preserved because of systems of oppression. Now, this harks back to the naturalist movement of the first few decades of the 20th century, and they're characterized by a very general back to the woods movement, which means that the elite were looking to go spend more time out in nature. Right, this is inspired by writings by John Muir, efforts of the Boy Scouts, and the National Parks movement, which all help to change people's perceptions about the environment. This is even seen in changes in horticultural culture, which basically means how people felt about gardens. There's an ongoing movement against Victorian gardens, and instead people are looking for less cultivated and more natural wild spaces. So John Hay was a Secretary of State under Roosevelt, and Roosevelt visited the Hay Estates, bringing the maple tree with him. There's in fact a 136-page letter that documents Roosevelt's discussion with John Hay about the wilderness of the West, the boldness of frontiersmen, Western expansion, and how his formative years as a cattle rancher really changed the way he perceived the wilderness. Now, we have to recognize that even though Roosevelt is often touted as the father of the national park system, he had a lot of really racist ideas about Indigenous people. So it's said that he had a respect for Indigenous people as warriors, but thought of them as savages and believed they should be eradicated by the ongoing movement of backwoodsmen, which would equivalently move into those wild spaces, pushing out Indigenous peoples. So he's part of a circle of conservationists that saw the park system as America's best idea, but really saw which spaces he chose to be included in the park system as based on his views as what was noble or majestic about the landscape. So these circles were often exclusive to elite men, especially on the East Coast. So we need to recognize that which spaces were protected and why they were protected is really ingrained to that circle of people.